Thanks for joining me for another video, and welcome to the long-awaited update to my Sport Essentials video I did in December 2019. It ended up being pretty popular, and I've had a lot of requests to update it to include all the new releases since then. I'm not exactly going to update or revise it, more or less just add on to it and let you know where all the new stuff stands. For the vast majority of people out there, we buy new balls because it's fun, not necessarily because we need them. Now, nobody needs to drag 6 balls into League, but we do it because it's fun and really more interactive than just taking the same 2 every week for years and taking what we get. However, when it comes to sport conditions for the competitive bowlers, collegiate players, or those looking to build a serious arsenal to work towards becoming more competitive, the focus shifts to looking for specific hook potentials and shapes and looking at balls more as tools and less as toys. Starting at the top with the king of hook in the Storm and Roto lines right now, we have the UFO, and I'm showing it on the 2019 USBC Open Championships doubles and singles pattern, 28 mils, 42 feet. The UFO features Microtrax S20, so it's a super strong, high-load nano cover. Characteristics are early, smooth, blendy, and continuous. The new ET core is a strong ASIM that also utilizes some cutouts at the bottom of the core to mimic weight holes. It actually kind of reminds me of the atomic core in the physics line from a reaction standpoint. It's very torquey, creates a lot of shape, and with that look inside what should be a pretty smooth and slow cover, the result is a super strong ball that's right in the middle. It definitely has more shape than most big solid ASIMs, more hit and power as well. Typically the super strong stuff is more about getting you some kind of traction on soup. You have to create the angle and hit. Now the UFO noticeably adds some extra punch down lane. I think a big part of that is due to how well nano covers retain energy. And also, like I said, the core creates a big move down lane. I think this is the most shape I've seen out of a nano base solid, so it both handles the heaviest volumes out there and gives you a pretty dynamic look. Now this is definitely a one ball for anyone and everyone. I think Global's volatility is the only ball on the market that might be stronger. Moving down to the nuclear cell, this is also a one ball no matter what, even if you leave the shine on it. It's the strongest shiny ball I've ever thrown. It still manages traction on this pattern, and I'm not sure anyone would ever consider using this ball on something tough with the shine on it anyway, so assuming we're going to 2,000 or 3,000 with the cover, it's nearly UFO strong at that point and still has more shape. The E-Trax formula has no additives or enhancements, so it's a cleaner and more responsive formula. I don't know how this year's version's so strong, but it is. Now, if you have next to 0 revs and a ton of speed, this could possibly maybe marginally be a 2-ball under the UFO with the shine left on it for transition, but I think that's just a bad idea. Shiny balls generally don't play well on tougher conditions unless you have some solid predictable friction to work with, but on the kind of volume you'd need for a shiny nuke to be in play, getting some friction worked in will also mean you've probably got a cliff or some wet dry or some solid friction next to some solid oil, and that's going to give you over-under reaction. Even with as much actual traction as a shiny nuke manages, it's still pretty responsive too, and that's just going to exaggerate wet dry. I really think it's amazing at 3,000, so if you don't quite need UFO strength and need or want more shape, the nuke is a great one-ball alternative. The Parallax is the next one we'll look at, just recently released, and it's unique because it's quite a bit smoother than most ASIMs, especially shiny ones. It's down more towards Omega Crux territory with the shape, not quite that smooth, but it's also got a very strong cover. Now, most people have taken the shine off of it. I'm still on the fence about that because of how strong and smooth it already is. Sanding it is just going to push it further into niche territory because it's going to require much more volume in the heads and be even slower down lane. I think it's a solid 2-ball. Julia Bond was actually using it on Mexico City or the left lane pattern during the finals of the recent Brad and Kyle Women's Open. That's available to see on their channel. It looked amazing for her. The Parallax is a great blend of strength and control. It's more of an ASIM option for those who can't normally throw ASIMs. It's tricky on your eyes though because you expect shiny ASIMs to boom more, but it goes a couple feet longer and is rounder than you think it's going to be. I think this makes it a perfect ball for tougher conditions, and because it reminds me so much of an NRG Pearl type reaction, yes, I know it's a hybrid, but we're talking actual reaction, not spec sheets here. That type of look is absolutely perfect for mid to late in a block on heavier and longer conditions when they're starting to get beat up, but you still need a stronger ball. A lot of stronger balls can be too early, and once you shell down to get into something that's going to get down the lane, then you're getting into weaker cores too that aren't going to start up or wind up quick enough, so you get yourself in this catch-22 type situation. Now, despite the shiny cover, the Parallax blends wet-dry very well in my opinion. The shine allows you to get through the fronts easier while still getting the blend of the slower response, and with it not burning energy, you've got a ball that gets you through the fronts like a high road but revs up and blends like something a lot stronger. I just feel like if you sand that to maybe get more frequent use out of it, it is a more specific use ball as is right out of the box, I think, but if you sand it down, I think you get too close to Omega territory. Speaking of the Omega, let's take a look. The Crux series is well known for controllable power. We still see alphas out there a lot. The Omega's popped up a few times. It was involved with one of Chris Prather's titles right after it came out. And despite it technically being a pearl, this drives home the point that paying attention to cover designators can be more distracting than helpful. When you're building a tournament bag for tougher conditions, you're looking at traction and shape, and this is the point where we start ignoring some of the details on paper and looking at what reaction you actually end up with on the lane. The Omega acts like a bigger symmetric ball, or one that's firmer at the break point. Now, when I say firmer, I don't necessarily mean sharper or stronger, I mean more consistent at the break point, and that's the idea with Asyms. As the lanes transition, symmetrics will be affected more while Asyms are more assertive. The extra torque that asymmetry creates helps them ignore carry down more and rev up through softer and heavier conditions, especially as you add angle. In the 2020 Tournament of Champions, Chris was using the idle on the right lane in the earlier matches, but it started getting long and too slow. The Omega shaped similarly, but the extra torque of the core helped it rev and be firmer and more consistent to dig and create better shape down lane while still retaining the rounder and more controllable look that Chris favors. There's really not a better illustration of the Asym versus Sim concept than to go back and watch that show. It's on YouTube, so I'd highly recommend checking it out once you're done with this one, because it's an incredible comparison between two very similar looks on the lane, but with the very clear distinction of the core types. The Idle and Omega shape very similarly and handle the lane very similarly, but the difference is quite clear when they're compared in such a perfect situation. I also think the Omega is a solid 2-ball. It can be a 1-ball on lower volume or shorter patterns, and I mean lower volume for sport patterns, which is like 23 or 24 mils, which is still quite a bit more than most normal league patterns, which come in around 20. Moving to another similar feel and look, we have the Axiom. The Axiom features the new NEX cover stock, which is an evolution of the NRG formula, more durable, longer lasting, and somehow stronger, but it became an instant player on the tours because it's a similar strength and look as the Idle, Phase 2, and Omega. It's even a little stronger than the Idle, it's continuous like the Phase 2, and it has a near Asym feel down lane like the Omega. That's just all wrapped into one package. The new orbital core feels like a stronger version of the piston core that's in the trend, which we'll touch on in a minute. It's very rolly, windy, and continuous, and will get back from bigger angles with more strength than virtually any other solid symmetric. The Phase 2 will get back from anywhere too, but it's slower, so sometimes the volume and angle could just be too much, where the Axiom is stronger and more dynamic. The Axiom will control straighter angles like these other balls. The one caveat is that it could be too strong or too early, where these others might be better from right of third arrow, so it's not like a magic ball that's just better and replaces all these other ones. However, when you have a ball like the Phase 2 that's been really popular for several years, then you have something like the Idle that kind of quietly gained popularity for a couple years, just like the P2, then you have an Alpha Crux that's hung around and that everyone misses. The result is that they've spent several years gathering intel and feedback and testing, and I've got a sentence that's too long to say in one breath. With as quickly as it's been adopted by the touring players, that really says something to me. When you bowl at that high of a level and getting the most out of every shot is so crucial, you can't afford to just drill whatever's new and learn it during a qualifying block or risk a TV appearance on it. I mean, most people won't even risk a league set on a new ball, but they're quick to talk if they don't see a new release on TV. The Axiom, I think, is a legitimate 1-ball for two-handers or higher rev rates and no lower than a 2-ball for everyone else. Despite it being symmetric, the cover is super strong and the core is really continuous. The Rubicon is up next, and as of the release date of this video, the Rubicon isn't available to the public yet, but I think this is one we'll see the pros using a lot also. The new Rondeur core was designed to be like a symmetric ball with a low weight hole, so it's technically asymmetric, but not by much, so it's got more torque than a symmetric, but not as much as typical Asyms. This makes it still firmer than the Axiom at the break point, but not as muscular as something like the UFO. I think the Rubicon is in Code X and Alpha Crux territory. It's a little quicker on friction than both, with a weaker core than the X and a weaker cover than the Alpha, so the blend puts it in the right total hook potential zone, and with surface on it, this one's going to be a great ball on longer patterns specifically, I think. If you go too strong on longer and heavier patterns, you can blow a hole in the track and get that kind of skid hook skid effect that just burns ball energy and makes angles super tricky. The Rubicon is the right compromise between a little extra in the core with a still strong but cleaner cover that's not as diggy as Microtrax or NRG or NEX. It's not built to mow through crazy volumes like the UFO. It's built to get enough traction and give you a bit more shape than you typically get out of the snow tires. The Rubicon's also kind of in the middle like the Axiom. The core is stronger than the Orbital, but the cover is weaker than NEX, so I think it's a 1 ball for bigger rev rates and slower speeds and a 2 ball for everyone else. The IQ Tour Nano Pearl is the next stop and really feels like a true evolution in the IQ line. The Tour Solid and the Gold Ball / Emerald are now the standards, great blends of hook, shape, and control, but they naturally don't like angle. They'll be great for slower speeds and lower rev rates that give them the time and help to wind up and go, but they don't and won't do all the work themselves. They're meant to control the lane. The Nano Pearl, on the other hand, is one of the most continuous balls I've ever thrown, period. I think it's the smoothest one of the three, but it's also the earliest, so that balances out the shape down lane, and I'm going to pat myself on the back here again by bringing the point back up about Nano / NRG. It doesn't burn energy on friction, and that's why this ball is able to be so continuous. Quicker response balls will save more energy for a stronger or faster motion on friction, but they can also use too much of it making the turn and not be able to sustain it. Nano is slower on friction, so you're not going to see a super quick move, but it's not going to use that energy up on hooking. The Tour Nano Pearl still gives you that traditional round IQ shape and the control, but with added strength and continuation we haven't seen in an IQ before, even from the Tour Nano Solid we got a few years ago. The Tour Nano Pearl is strong enough to be a 2-ball, but it can also reach down to the 3-ball territory if it shined, and especially because of how smooth and controllable it is. I wouldn't want to try to make the TNP more ball than it actually is. While it's got a strongish cover, it's still a Pearl, and the centripetal C3 core is built for control, so it's on the low side of a 2-ball for bigger rev rates, but more comfortably a 3-ball. The Trend is the most confusing ball here because while it's quick response and very continuous, the boomy nature makes it sound like a much better idea for house or league patterns than for sport ones. R2S is an amazing cover though because despite how quick response it is, it helps create a rounder shape and is quite consistent. The IQ Emerald shows up quite often on TV, the Code Black had its time, and the High Road Pearl's been involved in a couple of Belmo's tournament wins. Now when you add in the astrophysics, I can't imagine a tournament bag without an R2S Pearl ball in it. They're absolutely critical for mid to later in blocks. No matter how hard the pattern starts out, it'll always open up some, and having something that gets down the lane so easily and creates such a strong and round shape really makes the pocket big. Sometimes sharper balls can be too sharp or straight, and that's not great for pin carry, but R2S doesn't seem to have that problem. Time will tell how useful the Trend is for tougher conditions, but as it's similar to the Idle Pearl but more continuous, I'd think it's got a shot to show up on TV a lot. It might need the shine knocked off of it. I'm not sure I'd actually sand it, but a light scuff to break the factory shine could be helpful. I'm a big fan of that core though, so it's going to get its fair share of looks, and I'll be sure to report on what I find out. The Trend is a solid 3-ball. Typically, it'll always be Asym at the top, stronger symmetric ball in the 2 slot, and the 3 slot is where we start getting into medium strength balls that you expect to get heavy use out of, and after a couple games breaking the lanes down, balls in the 3 spot are the ones you'll likely be using the majority of the time, and the Trend on paper definitely fits the 3-ball idea. The MVP Attitude will be the most underrated and slept on ball on this list, unfortunately. This is one of those quiet performers that doesn't draw enough attention, but that you'll instantly appreciate when you drill it. I'm actually retrofitting this one for my left hand, partially to test out a layout because as it's drilled now, it's a 5-inch pin righty and would be a 5.5-inch pin lefty. Even if it doesn't work out, I'm definitely drilling a lefty-specific Attitude and will stash several. It's absolutely the perfect combination of hook, roll, shape, lane control, pin control, forgiveness, versatility. It has literally everything. I've seen a handful of other people that have thrown it, and they've all been stunned as well. This is an absolutely perfect sport option because it can do virtually anything you ask it to. It's strong enough to play on wetter and heavier stuff with surface, but it's smooth enough that it could help control shorter patterns. You can walk it in from straight or get revving and a firm finish from deep. I'm going to be a total staffer guy homer on this one, but I'm really impressed with it, and I really believe in it. I don't think it's just a case of a good matchup for me. It makes no noise or draws any attention, and the shelf appeal is average, but it just does work. I mean, as we watch this footage and watch me play all over the lane, just kind of putting/dumping it out there and letting it do the rest, I get more impressed the more I watch it. If you watch previous videos, my rev rate's a lot higher, and despite my arm kind of deteriorating, it ended up being pretty perfect for this video and the tournament I won a couple days later. Now, finding a reaction I have this kind of confidence in is rare, and again, that sentiment doesn't seem to be limited to me. The Attitude is a solid 4-ball. It doesn't have the core to be a 3-ball, and despite the overall strength, it feels more in wild streak territory for me because of how far down it can comfortably reach. It's strong enough to reach up into 3-ball territory, but it's built more for medium stuff, so I think the 4-ball spot is where it fits the best. Now we'll move down into the new Hustles and Electrifies, starting with the strongest in the Hustle PBR. This is kind of a wild ball to fit into this kind of concept because automatically you're thinking, okay, Hustles are lower end, HP 1, so this is automatically going to go in the 5-ball spot. Not quite, it's a bit stronger than that, so maybe it hops up into the 4-ball spot. Definitely strong enough for that, but this ball actually outhooks my IQ Tour Solid, so not only is it solidly a 4-ball, it could even be a weak 3-ball. The core isn't quite as strong as the IQ TS, but it's really close, and with the cover being actually stronger in my estimation, and the ideas being similar, this is a low 3-ball and a stronger 4-ball. It's not quite IQ Tour levels of lane management, but it's really close. It's early, it's smooth, it's blendy, it's controllable, it's a mid-block, hit-the-pocket ball at its finest. The Hustle Wrap is a similar idea, but it's a solid 4-ball. The Wrap is nearly IQ Emerald strength, but it shapes more like an Idle Pearl. It's got a sharper and more hook set type of look, while the Emerald is rounder and more blendy. As I said in the review, there's way too much overlap to carry around a Wrap, an Emerald, and an Electrify Pearl. Especially in a collegiate bag, you could get away with either the Wrap or Emerald and the E-Pearl. There's enough difference between the E-Pearl and the other two to carry both in, say, an 8-ball tournament setup, especially if it's a longer format, but the Wrap by itself covers a lot of territory. I think it handles angle better than the Emerald and reaches up nearly as high in hook potential. The Emerald plays better from straight for me, but when you're down to this strength of a ball, especially on the right side of the lane, you're usually in deeper. Moving down to the Electrify Pearl, it's a baby Emerald and fits firmly in the 5-ball slot. It's more of a true light oil ball and one of the best we've seen on the lower end from Storm. It's not as much of a bang for your buck attitude as balls like the Wipeout and Punch-Out were, but at the same time, those were much too strong for the line they were in, and stronger than the High Road and High Road Pearl even. With the Electrifies now and the Tropical rework from last year, there's a much more staggered and appropriate approach as far as steps up and steps down. The Ride and Joyride from a few years ago were incredible, true dry to light condition balls, but the Tropicals were virtually relegated to entry-level balls. You'd never see those in a competition setting. The rides were amazing, but then there was too big of a jump from those to a High Road. So the Tropicals now are virtually the rides, and the Electrifies fit perfectly between them and the balls in the Thunderline, so the Electrify Pearl is the perfect pick for when you want an IQ Emerald type look in a weaker package. The E-Hybrid is actually both weaker and smoother than the Pearl, but I tend to favor it more because of that. The Pearl gets most of the love, but the Hybrid shouldn't be slept on. It's also a solid 5-ball, very clean, very readable, reminds me a ton of the Rocket from 2015, I believe, just weaker. I think this is a perfect look for heavier hands in the last couple games of a block when they're really beat up. It's not quite as responsive as the Pearl or something like a High Road Pearl, despite how good that one is on dirt too. This will blend everything even a little more and still allow you more control over the reaction while reaching down to true light conditions. This is much more of a garbage time ball than the Pearl is. I think the Pearl will be best when you still have somewhat of a look left, but if it's starting to get too early or over-under, the Hybrid is an amazing stay out of trouble and get out of dodge type ball. This is that game 8 ball when everyone else is struggling and 190 is a great score. On the left side, it's a great all 8 games ball when they're toasty, or just the ultimate angle management ball. It's actually gotten more use than any other lefty ball I own thus far. I'm a pretty big fan. This will wrap up my Sport Essentials update. I will periodically release more of these to include several months worth of releases. I'll try to make them as the balls release as well, but I stay pretty busy, so we'll see how that goes. A lot of great stuff included in this update. If I were to make a bag just out of the balls in this video, the most reasonable or varied I'd think would be 1-ball UFO, 2-ball Parallax, 3-ball IQ Tornado Pearl, 4-ball Attitude, and 5-ball Electrify Hybrid, but then we're leaving out stuff like the Omega and the Axiom, the Trend, Hustle PBR, and Electrify Pearl, but then we don't have stuff like the Rubicon that might be the most versatile ball on the list, and just heck it all. I'm having all kinds of trouble just picking out league bags, let alone tournament bags. And then what about all the other stuff I already have drilled before this, just sitting there? And let me tell you about the stuff I'm about to drill. I mean, I've got